reminders. Later today, there's going to be an auction, or online there's the silent auction that y'all should take a look at. Later today, there's going to be a raffle out here in the chill out area. And just like to take a moment, thank all the sponsors for, providing this venue and all the cool stuff, all the speakers. They're coming to do all this. And without further ado, it's Mr. D0n Quix0te. He's here to talk about all the stuff that y'all are here to listen to.
So before we get started, I have a tradition in my talks. I've been doing this for 30 years. Back when I was at Lockheed, we used to do this. I like to hand out marshmallows to the crowd. You guys can pass them around, take them, eat them if you like. The way that we use them at Lockheed and the way that I like to use them is I have a tendency to get really detailed into things and waste a bunch of time on a specific subject. I encourage you to, if you want to eat the marshmallows, by all means eat them. If I get too detailed into something and I've gone off the rails, throw them at me. So I've only been pelted once, so I think I'm actually getting better at this. The pseudonym that I go under is D0n Quix0te. You can reach me at omenscan on Twitter or omenscan@gmail.com if you'd like to send me an email. Tell me how much you either liked or hated this talk. Right now I'm doing global incident response at Live Nation, which I refer to as the coolest company on the planet. Really, really great company to work for. I'm having a great time working there. I had to say that because there are some Live Nation people here. No, but honestly, really, I enjoy working for this company a lot. Prior to that, I was 16 years at NASA, and then I did Nerd for Hire for a while, and then prior to that, 7 years at Lockheed. Please don't add those all up. My background is in architecting and defending high-value targets, especially when I worked at NASA. Firewalls, IDS, web filtering, vulnerability management. I wrote FISMA security plans, did incident response, essentially anything that had to do with security. My disclaimer, I don't speak for anyone I work for or have worked for or will work for. This talk is not endorsed, approved, or liked by anybody I have ever worked for, ever. In fact, these opinions are mine, and I might be wrong, and I reserve the right to change my mind. So before we get into the meat of the presentation, I want to define some terms. You'll hear these terms used a lot, and they're very broad terms, so I'd like to narrow them a little bit just for the purpose of this talk. For the purpose of this talk, we're going to say an artifact is a digital item or remnant that's produced by actions taken on a digital device. We're going to say forensics is the process of identifying, extracting, and analyzing evidence, analyzing the artifacts from digital devices. Live acquisition, which is mostly what we're going to talk about today, is extracting digital artifacts from a live running system. And then dead box, a term that I'm sure most of you have heard, is essentially extracting the digital artifacts or doing analysis on a system that has already been shut down. So again, before we get started into the meat, I want to make sure that we understand a few things about this talk. Incident response and forensics, they're difficult and complicated things. After seeing this presentation, won't make you an incident responder. So if you suspect a crime has been committed on an endpoint, get someone qualified to look at it. You don't want someone who's committed a crime to get away with it because the evidence has been destroyed or has not been gathered in a manner that will hold up in court. Make sure you either have or get permission to pull artifacts off of a workstation. You don't want to think you're doing a good thing and then get fired for it, right? So again, this is not a forensics class or an incident response class. Having said that, let's talk about some of the really cool free tools that you can use to gather artifacts from a workstation. A workstation has malware on it, or you've been asked to look at a workstation that's doing something funny. and you know that this is not going to go to court, this is not going to be a digital crime, and so you want to look at this workstation and see what's happened. Actually, before I talk about that, I'd like to make a quick comment. I just thought about this before I started talking. My grandfather had a big bucket of screws that he kept in his garage. And whenever something would break, we would ask Grandpa to fix it. And he would get this big bucket, it had brackets and screws and all sorts of things in it. And it was amazing that he was able to fix almost anything with this big bucket of just metallic stuff. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. All of these tools that are freely available that can be put together to gather forensics, to learn information about what's happened on a workstation. All these little pieces that can be put together to create sort of a cohesive way of gathering information about what may have happened on a workstation. When we talk about live box versus dead box, the first thing that we need to determine is, are we going to shut this thing down? If we're going to do live acquisition, we need for the machine to keep running. If we don't, if there's something really bad happening, and just pulling the plug out of the wall or turning it off from the switch is not going to be enough. If we want that machine shut down immediately, you're not going to be able to get live artifacts. You're not going to be able to do live acquisition. So you're going to lose the volatile artifacts, memory, connections, the existing connections. It turns out when you do live box and dead box analysis, many of the artifacts are actually the same. Some will be lost, though. So when you're looking at doing live acquisition, you're looking at gaining those artifacts that would be lost when you would shut that machine down. Gathering artifacts, either live box or dead box, they're often the same artifacts, and many of them use actually the same utilities, but just different options. And we're going to focus primarily on live acquisition today. There are a lot of really, really good Windows tools for gathering artifacts, gathering forensics on a Windows machine. Problem is, finding them is hard. And once you find them, there's going to be a lot of trial and error to figure out, what do I want repeatable? When I go up to a machine, what options do I want to run this utility with? And it turns out many of these utilities are vertical. They're very specific. So you need many utilities to gather many artifacts. There's not one single utility that will just give you all the information you want. So what I'm going to talk about here is not only gathering the artifacts, but creating the toolkit to gather those artifacts. And part of creating a toolkit to do that is to know where the utilities are at and to download them. Now you could use a web browser, you could search Google, you could do this all manually. But once you know where these utilities are, you can actually create a toolkit, create a script that creates the toolkit, automatically downloads the utilities and unzips them from the websites of the researchers that provide them for us. For that, I like using curl. You may find a different utility that you like better. I like curl a lot. And then InfoZip. These are both free. Curl will download HTTP, do HTTP downloads, and InfoZip will unzip them. So we have all these utilities, but we don't want to walk up to a workstation with a handful of utilities and have to type them all in. So we want to take everything and put it into a cohesive, repeatable, and understandable process. And to do that, we script it. We script all the utilities together. Now, the problem with scripting is that we run into something called observer's paradox. Observer's paradox is this concept that by observing something, you actually change it. And this is what we find when we're doing live acquisition. When we do an acquisition on a machine, we are actually changing that machine. So we want to think about something called order of volatility. What are our most volatile artifacts? What are the things that are most likely to change, and gather those first? The easiest example is, let's say I'm at a workstation, I want to gather, I want to dump the memory, I want to gather registry, I want to copy the registry, I want to get the log files. Each one of those you need a program to run to do that acquisition. So the first thing you want to do is acquire the memory. Because if you're loading 3 programs into memory, you've modified memory 3 times. Rather than modify memory 3 times, grab the memory first. Then if you modify memory later, you're not worried about it. You've already grabbed memory. So order of volatility is something to be concerned about when you do this. I usually try to grab everything I can. You may run into issues of how much time you have available or how much disk space you have available. I've run into both of those. And so when I run into that, the artifacts I gather are the ones that I think I'm most likely to need. So let's talk about specific artifacts. First, gathering memory. Two great utilities, WinPmem and Memorize. First utility, this is all free software that I'm talking about. WinPmem can be downloaded from the Google Recall repo in GitHub. It's my favorite utility because it's really easily to script. It's really easy to script, and it's really easy to download. So if you're creating a toolkit to download these utilities, this is very easy. Mandiant also provides a great utility called Memorize. Works consistently well. I've used it for years. Very good utility for grabbing memory. But it does have some idiosyncrasies that make it a little bit less desirable than WinPmem, in my mind. Others may feel differently. There are a few others. There was a new one I saw by Magnet Forensics, I think, that looked really good. I've played with it a little bit. But these two are the ones I use consistently. Side note, Volatility is a free piece of software you can use to then analyze the memory dumps that you've created. Volatility is a wonderful piece of software. Whether volatility is free, but if you had to pay for it, it would be worth it. Just a tremendous piece of software. So the next artifact that we're interested in is disk artifacts, right? So the primary thing that you're going to be interested is something called the MFT, the master file table. Turns out, not only in Windows, but in a lot of operating systems, there are some areas of the disk that just really aren't meant to be copied. So there are no native or common ways to do that. So we need people like, I'm probably going to butcher his name. I think it's pronounced Joachim Schicht, J. Schicht. He provides a free utility called raw copy. This will copy both the MFT and the $log file and he also provides another utility called extract USN journal, which will extract the USN journal, the $J. That's an ADS, an alternate data stream in the Windows NTFS file system. These three artifacts sort of form the indexing and journaling system of NTFS. So primarily the MFT is this database index of all of the metadata for all the files in NTFS. So file create time, file modified time, all the file flags. Now, it turns out the MFT is database-ish in that it grows, and when a file is deleted, the entry's not actually deleted in the MFT. It's just marked for reuse. So if you have a very large MFT and there isn't much activity on the system, MFT entries for files and directories on the system can last a very long time, days, weeks, months. So when you're looking at what may have happened on a workstation, even though the file may have been deleted, there still maybe an MFT entry for it. NTFS is a journaling file system. So the $log file and the USN journal form the journaling system. Again, just to reiterate, J. Schicht's GitHub repository provides these utilities, raw copy and extract USN journal, that can gather those artifacts. Just a quick note, these are raw artifacts. This would not be human readable. You need some other utility to then look at that data. There's a great piece of free software, ANJP. It's free for non-commercial use. If you're going to use it for commercial use, please pay for it. But it can read in the MFT log file in the USN journal and then give you a timeline of the activity on your system. I typically don't do that. I'm old school. I like to do things manually. So after I after I gather the MFT, I like to put it into a human-readable format, comma-separated values, and then import it into a spreadsheet and do manual analysis. For that, there's a great piece of software called MFT dump. This is provided by the malware hunters. If you do a Google search, you'll be able to find it. It will take this raw MFT and parse it into a comma-separated value that you can then do analysis on it, however you normally would do your analysis. I use a spreadsheet, but whatever will read comma-separated values will read this data, and you can do analysis on it. GMG Systems also provides a set of utilities called FAU, Forensics Acquisition Utilities. Volume Dump is the utility, but it's in a set of utilities. There's a whole bunch of stuff in it. And it will also parse the USN journal into a human-readable format. This artifact, a utility is actually provided by Microsoft, a native Windows utility called FSUtil, and it will also parse the USN journal, dump it so that it's human-readable. So the next set of artifacts we're going to look at are systems information. Probably everyone in the room here knows about sysinternals. I love their PS tools. Sysinternals just provides just tons of really great utilities. In this case, we're just going to talk about PS Info, which is in this set of tools, PS Tools. It will give you system information on a live running system. PS List give you information on the running processes. And then another utility, I don't believe it's in PS Tools, I think it's a separate sysinternals utility called Handle, will give you all of the open file handles on a running system. Extremely useful utility. Within Windows, there are also some really useful native utilities. SC Service Control, I think that stands for. But the SC Query command will give you service information. Task List, another native utility, will give you running process and service information. And then on everybody's favorite network information utility, Netstat. Okay, so the registry. Now, registry has a lot of moving parts. So I'm going to try and not be confusing about this. I've tried to break it into pieces, and I hope it's not too confusing. So registry can be thought of as basically two pieces: the user registry and the system registry. User registry, we typically refer to the Hive HKCU, H key current user. That is in a file called ntuser.dat within each user's user profile. The system registry that's applicable to the whole system is in system32config. The four main files that we usually look at, there are more, but the four main files we usually look at are system SAM, security, and software. That's the name of the file within system32config. When we're doing a live acquisition, those files are open and active, so we can't copy them. We have to consider this when we're trying to figure out how we're going to gather the information that's in the system registry. We have to consider some other unusual issues with the registry, namely that one of the main hives we're interested in is something called current control set. That hive doesn't actually exist. It's a symbolic link to one of two other registry hives, either called ControlSet 1 or ControlSet 2. When a system is running, current ControlSet is just a pointer to one of those two sets of registry entries. The way we know, if we were doing dead box analysis, the way we would know which one was being used is this registry entry, HKey local machine system, select current. It will say it's using either ControlSet 1 or ControlSet 2. So when we look at acquiring the registry, we're not going to be able to copy any of those files, and the registry hive itself, current control set, we have to understand is not actually in the registry. So how do we deal with this? Well, when we look at the registry, we have really three sort of pieces to this. We can copy the registry or duplicate the registry in its raw format, in its in its machine-readable format. We could parse the registry, which would put it in human-readable format. The problem with parsing the registry is you lose the metadata. So what are we concerned about when we do analysis? What is the metadata we're concerned about? Turns out the registry keeps track of the last time a registry key was written. So if we duplicate the raw registry information and then analyze it, we will get this metadata. We will be able to find out when the last time each registry key was written, and that can be very useful when trying to build a timeline to figure out what transpired on this machine. But parsing the registry into a human-readable format also has value. So if we want to, since we can't copy the files and we want them in a raw format, we can use a native Windows utility called reg. Reg allows you to do two things. It allows you to do a reg save and a reg export. Reg save essentially duplicates the registry hive that you're interested in looking at. It will preserve the metadata. If you just want the key value pairs, you could do a registry export and do analysis just on that. So if you do a registry save and you get this raw format, you're still eventually going to want to see the data in a human-readable format. So doing dead box analysis or doing analysis on the artifact that you've gathered using, the raw artifact you've gathered using registry save, there are two extremely good utilities. Reg file export is freely available by Nursoft. It will parse the hives from the raw registry data. And Reg Ripper, the most excellent Reg Ripper by Harlan Carvey. You can run this against the raw registry data that you've gathered, and it will give you the last write time.
He's in Las Vegas.
I'm sorry?
Las Vegas.
Oh, okay. The next artifact that we're going to be interested in, oh, I'm doing great. Okay, good. The next artifact we're going to be interested in is the event logs. These turn out to be very easy to acquire. Under System32 WinEVT logs, you could just use a regular DOS copy to copy this data. One thing you do have to be aware of, a little idiosyncrasy, is if you're using Windows native tools, on a 64-bit system, System32 doesn't really exist. It's called sysnative. But you can refer to System32 and it will work. Microsoft will map everything over to System32. However, when you're writing your own utilities, you have to know that you actually want to grab the artifacts from sysnative. When you want to parse those event logs into a human-readable format, another tremendous sysinternals tool, psloglist. I like this utility a lot. So other artifacts we're going to be interested in when we do live acquisition. The prefetch information. So Red Wolf Computer Forensics provides a utility called parse prefetch info. I guess you can guess what that utility does. But it will take the prefetch data in a Windows system and parse it into, I parse it into comma-separated values, and then I can import them into a spreadsheet and do analysis on it. Nursoft, excuse me, I'm going to get a drink of water here. Nursoft also provides some other really good utilities. Last activity view, very, very cool utility. We'll essentially go through all the common areas in a Windows system where activity information is stored in the registry, in the event logs, in the prefetch. It'll go through all of those areas and then create one file of all the activity that's happened on your system. And some of this activity can go back years. This is a really, really, really cool tool. He also provides a piece of software called User Assist View. This will give you the last time and count of the system, the programs that were run on the system. And then a browsing history view, all available again from Nursoft. This will take the 4 major browsers, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, and Safari, and it will go through the history data of all of these utilities, of all of these browsers, and put them into one cohesive file to be analyzed. Turns out when you're doing analysis on machines, it's not uncommon at all for someone to use multiple browsers on a machine. So having one view of the history of all 4 browsers can be really useful. One other thing real quick, you'll notice that we might be gathering the same forensic artifacts from multiple places. This is also really important and helpful because when you're trying to build, to reconstruct what happened on a workstation, if you have an artifact that says something happened, that's useful. If you have 2 artifacts from two separate areas of the operating system that tell you the same thing happened, then you have corroboration. You're far more likely to be on the right path if multiple artifacts corroborate what you believe may have happened on that workstation. So last thing I'm going to talk about is a piece of software called Acquire, which I'm releasing today. We talked about all of these utilities that we want to be scripted, and to consider the volatility of those artifacts, for that to be repeatable, for things to be put in the same place. When you gather the artifacts, if you have a script that does this, you don't want artifacts from one of your acquisitions to step on artifacts of another acquisition. So what I wanted to do was to create a scripting tool and framework so that you could script all of these utilities in the most beneficial way, and to add things into the scripting language that you wouldn't see in a normal scripting language. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. So what was the problem I was trying to solve? If you've worked with any incident responders, you know that eventually every incident responder creates a script to do this. I've seen these scripts in batch files, VBScript, PowerShell, Perl. They can come in all sorts of flavors and fashions. What I have not found is a script that helps you build the toolkit. Now, why is that important? It turns out that after many years, I had all sorts of stuff in my scripting toolkit. I wasn't sure where I got it from. I wasn't using it anymore. I wasn't sure if I still needed it. Toolkits you can lose track of your toolkit very quickly. So I wanted to create a utility that not only ran acquisition, but allowed you to build the acquisition toolkit itself, and thus kind of self-document itself. So I also wanted to create a common framework. I wanted to create a utility that wouldn't matter whether I was sitting at the box or I was doing an acquisition over the network. So I wanted to create a common framework where all the files were stored in the same place. Every time I ran an acquisition, a new directory was created. So these are things that you have to think about when you're writing your own scripting, when you're scripting your own live acquisition toolkit. So I wanted to build a scripting language or a scripting framework that automatically did all that, and a couple other things that I'll talk about. And I also wanted it to be able to pull artifacts from Deadbox, from a mounted drive. So what are some of the things you do over and over again that you just don't find in common scripting languages? You can put them in scripting languages. You can download a hashing program. You can set your artifacts to read-only. But typically, you're going to always do that, so why not build it in? So some of the common things I wanted to do was, when I downloaded the program, the scripting, the set of scripting commands to create the toolkit, I wanted to hash the programs. Not just hash the data when I do the acquisition, but hash the programs themselves when I create the scripting toolkit. Now, why is that important? Because when I do the acquisition, I also built into the scripting language automatic logging. So now I have the hash of the program I downloaded. When I run the acquisition, I hash the program. Is this the same program that I downloaded, or has something changed, right? This helps with non-repudiation. So yes, I'm sure that the program I downloaded is the program that gathered this artifact when I ran the toolkit. I wanted to do local and remote acquisition, and I wanted to set the artifacts to read-only. So I may be the only person in the room that's ever done this, but I have opened an artifact and accidentally resaved it. It's the same artifact, but now I've put into question my non-repudiation. I've changed the timestamp. I can prove that it's the same thing. I can rehash it. But why do that? Why not just have the scripting utility when it grabs the artifact, set it to read-only so you don't make the mistake? Yeah? No, I'm just using MD5, but this is open source. If you want to change it, by all means. And I'm encouraging people because, trust me, you guys are smarter than I am. So I'd like to get as many people involved to do as many things to this as possible. Yes? The original, I'm sorry, read-write.
You're changing something in the metadata, but setting it to read-only. Are you keeping track of what it originally was, whether it was read-only or not?
Well, it's going to be read-write because you're gathering the artifact, you're writing the artifact. So it's a new file.
So you're not maintaining original files?
Any original, I'm sorry, file?
If the original file was a read-only file or a writable file, you're not maintaining that knowledge?
No. No, it's just automatically set to read-only. But it's a good point. So, you know, maybe we have to give some thought to that. Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm here. I wanted to focus on order of volatility. I wanted to self-document. So not only the running of the toolkit, but the actual creating of the toolkit. I wanted it to be open source, and I wanted it to be compiled to minimize the impact on memory. So it's written in C. GCC. It's Windows. It's available on GitHub. You can download it now. There's an install file if you would just like to run it. The source code is there if you would like to modify it. Download it, test it, and then by all means send me emails because I am absolutely sure I have not thought of anything, and some of the things I have thought of, others may have a different opinion on it. And I'm totally open to changing it to whatever makes sense. Some of the things I'd like to do in the future, I'd like to see it become move more towards a repository model. So when I say that, I mean right now I'm going out to someone's website, I'm downloading their zipped utility, I'm unzipping it, and I'm putting it in a directory to then run it at some later time. What I'd like to see is a more sort of codified, this is where you get the utility, this is how you do it. That, of course, will take cooperation from the people that create the utilities, but I'm willing to have those discussions to say, you know, can we make it easier to get these utilities and download them? The other thing that I've been playing with a little bit now is throwing it up onto a cloud drive and then doing a remote acquisition by running it, both running the utility and saving the artifacts out to cloud to make it essentially available to anybody that would want to use it. So in your environment, you would have a small script that would map out to this cloud area and could then run the acquisition on the workstation. I think that's a good model. It's really, really, really slow. It's not practical right now, but again, I'd be absolutely willing to hear some input about that. Yeah?
So run this on, for a live act, do you have to consider any impact that that tool set might have on the actual host itself.
Yeah, so this is why, one of the reasons why I want to see this become, the question is, does the acquisition impact the workstation itself? It's going to impact the workstation in whatever way the person that wrote the utility, however they wrote it. So if they write to disk, it's going to impact the disk. It's going to impact memory. I mean, you're running a program, it's going to impact memory. So those are conversations that I'd like to start having. Can we as a community work on a utility that considers that important, right? Or are we just going to take a bunch of utilities, stick them in a batch file, and run them, right? So I think it's a better conversation to say, hey, let's build this framework, and let's think those things through. What? Yeah.
In its current state, do you think it would be a viable alternative to something like an Encase or Canyon Beeline?
No. No, this isn't going to replace commercial software. Could I see that a possibility in the future? As much as I would say volatility is really sort of the standard now. I think with enough community involvement, with enough thought about, how do we acquire these artifacts in a way that will hold up in court? Have we thought this through? Yeah, I think it could be a very viable, but in its current state, no. No, it's just the beginning of that. Yeah.
Why do you prefer doing an analysis on an actual live system, relying on like a software control for like read-only to preserve integrity to your disk image, as opposed to creating like a DD image of the disk and mounting,
right,
doing analysis plus doing like a memory snapshot of the live system in conjunction with analysis on like a DD image plus analysis of the memory snapshot?
Right. So yeah, really good question. What is essentially, I'm paraphrasing, but why focus on live acquisition versus dead box analysis? Why not image the drive or pull the drive? Couple of things. First of all, I don't have a preference. I do both.
Right blocker.
Yeah, right. To use a forensic bridge. Yeah. So pull the drive, use a forensic bridge to ensure that you're not modifying the drive in any way. Essentially, dead box analysis. I don't have a preference over live box versus dead box, but in many cases, first of all, you're going to lose volatile artifacts if you're just using dead box. So, go ahead.
So you do dead box analysis, but at the same time, when you acquire the hardware that you're doing analysis on, you do a memory snapshot of that. And then you do analysis of the memory snapshot separately, as in addition to your dead box analysis.
Right.
I think you have the ability to preserve the integrity of the drive that you're doing analysis that way, as opposed to just working natively on the live box.
Right. Okay. So, again, I want to be clear. I don't have a preference over one or the other. But what I will say is, I've run into many circumstances where I could not do dead box. A dead box acquisition, a very large RAID drive, a situation where you went in and it's a production system, you got 2 hours, you're not going to be able to acquire a drive in 2 hours.
Are you ensure that the integrity of the disk you're doing analysis on in the live setting is not tainted?
Not any more than in dead box analysis. I mean,
you're working off of an image, you mount it read-only.
But you have no guarantee, even in dead box analysis, that data has not been modified in any way. All you can say is, like when you hash, all you're saying is, I'm sure of it from this point forward. But knowing what happened before, whether those artifacts are trustable or not, an actor on that machine could have modified those artifacts.
I'm talking about like you as the forensic investigator tainting the artifacts.
So again, setting the artifacts to read only to make sure that you don't modify them. Always working on a copy of them. Don't work on your, I mean, again, this is not an IR class. So to go through all of the reasons, all of the ways that you would preserve integrity, that you would prove in a court that those artifacts are the artifacts that were acquired, that's way beyond this talk.
Just to clarification on that one, because I've seen most of his work. You know, in Europe, we're going to have 4 locations. I don't have incident responders in all the locations. So I need David to go and do an investigation on a particular machine that doesn't contain PII sensitive data, but I need him to find out what's happened. Give us that report. So, and also David can't get access to mystery drives from Europe because of European legislation, shipping drives from Germany is tricky. So he goes in, gets what he can.
There's ways to do it though. There's ways to do it globally. Like you can have, so if you have a site that's isolated from your incident response team, you can do stuff like have the help desk person using runbooks, either like DD it for you and do a memory snapshot of the system and then send those over to you through the internal network or the network that you have. You can also have them do a live mounted system too. So you can rip the disk out, put it into like a Linux box that mounted read-only, and then the investigator can conduct an investigation over SSH.
Yeah, and again, what he's really saying is that in situations, there are some situations where deadbox just doesn't make sense. It's not either practical or it's not even legal. So in those cases, this is our second best method. I'm sorry.
But with deadbox, for instance, if the drive is encrypted, when you turn the system off, you potentially lose all access to it anyways. And then if you use the right blocker and DE a drive, you get this encrypted trash. So you can't use anything, so you have to do your image on a live system anyways.
No, that's why you use things like this locker to encrypt the disk and then do analysis that way.
Yeah, those are questions that are really beyond this. Those get into, again, the analysis. I have had to do analysis on encrypted drives, and so you have to use some very specific techniques to do that. But that is not a decision of whether you want to do live box or dead box. But it is certainly, when you're doing incident response, or forensic analysis, I mean, if I get a disk drive and it's encrypted, my first reaction is, oh no. So, but you do what you can do.
You also got scenarios like Amazon Workspaces.
Yes. Yeah, so Amazon also, right.
What was that about workspaces?
Doing forensics on workspaces, I don't think we've come across a situation yet, but we've got users that are in a position to use Amazon Workspaces.
You can't do forensics on workspaces. It really sucks.
That's the challenge.
It is the challenge, yeah. They need to work on it.
Yeah, so again, I think probably everyone in the room is getting sort of a feel for, how many questions you have when you're doing this. And you make, through either your experience or through, working with the folks that are really expert in those technologies to say, what can we do here? And again, time is often an issue. I have been to places where we wanted to acquire the whole hard drive, but we had 2 hours, and it was a hard stop. It wasn't, well, we really don't want to give it up in 2 hours. It's our business shuts down at this time, and it comes back up at this time. If you don't get your data in 2 hours, that's your problem. So in those cases, you make the best of what you have. Gather the forensics that you can gather. Questions? What a lively group. Man, this is awesome.
Any more questions for Don? All right.
Yeah.
One thing I have a challenge. I do incident response to forensics.
Uh-huh.
Is having to explain to non-technical folk the time invested it takes to conduct a forensics analysis. Like, it could take 1 minute, and there's no way to really quantify it. Do you have any tips for me on that?
Okay, so here's what I would say, and I'm probably going to get in trouble because people I work with are here. But But here's my best answer to that. As long as I've been doing incident response and forensics, I've always taken it to from the approach of driving policy. So here's the thought. If I'm going to gather forensics and do analysis on this workstation, am I going to be able to convince people that they should change their behavior, right? So when you're looking at what you're essentially saying is, what is the value of spending 16 hours on this drive to tell you exactly what happened, rather than just wipe the drive and start over, right? The value is that in several circumstances, we've had recurrent issues that incidents have been able to show were based on the way we were doing business. So if this happened twice, it happened 3 times, the forensics over and over show that we need to change something. Now you can say to the organization, look, we are more secure because we have proven. We didn't come to you and say, theoretically, people could do this. We're saying, this has happened and we need to change what we're doing. And so you show that your value, that you have had impact on your workstation, or you have had impact on your organization, and have driven a more secure way of doing business.
Right, so you're talking about doing a root cause analysis.
Root cause.
Yeah, you do the root cause analysis, and then you find out how the data is compromised, or whatever the purpose of the investigation you're doing, and then doing a feedback loop into like your detection mechanisms, for example, and making sure that that doesn't happen again. Or
Even if you're not doing a feedback loop into your other tools, that's good. But even if you're not doing that, write a report. Write a report and make sure people read it. And at the end of that report, say, this is what we learned from this investigation, and this is what should be changed. And I cannot stress how valuable that is. You've read my reports. What do you think?
Pretty long.
They are long. They're very long and far too detailed for.
But also, there are a lot of good recommendations. So one thing I always chat to David about is he'll give a lot of recommendations that are necessary on capabilities we actually have within the company. But I think the recommendations are valued for when I take that to the business. I say, this is what we found. These are recommendations. These are capabilities we might want to look at in the next budget year. And start working through that. So he's not just looking at it from these are our capabilities and we have what we have. He's also looking ahead at
because you're going to see a lot of patterns that come out of these forensics investigations.
Yeah. Yeah. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, David.
All right, thank you. All right, thank everybody for coming.
Awesome.
Just a reminder about the silent auction.
Oh, here, let me shut this off.
The
Yes.
pool party later tonight, and here
Oh, okay.
at 7 for the closing
Oh, thank you.
ceremonies. They're going to